everybody. Good morning. Thank you all for joining us here today with the California Big City Mayors. I am Mayor Patricia Dawson, Mayor of the City of Riverside, and I have the honor of being the chairperson for this year's California Big City Mayors Coalition, and it's my pleasure to be here with my colleagues today from the cities of Anaheim, San Diego, Long Beach, Oakland, San Jose, Stockton, Irvine, and Sacramento. So we are all here today to talk to you about the need for funding HAP. We're here in Sacramento today because the governor's budget proposal significantly reduces funding for the Housing, Homeless Assistance and Prevention Program, or HAP. Last year's budget did not include any, not one dime, additional rounds of funding for the HAP program. And this year, the governor's proposed budget cuts round 7 funding in half. These cuts put critical programs and real progress at risk, sending the message that reducing homelessness is no longer a priority for the state. So without action by the legislature, our 13 cities will see a loss of 6,000 shelter beds and 41,000 Californians at risk of returning to homelessness. Let's be clear, HAP works, and it has been working, and we can't turn our back on it now. When the states invested in this program, our cities have delivered. Through HAP, California has achieved a 9% reduction in unsheltered homelessness. And our 13 cities have used those funds to serve over 320,000 individuals, add over 17,000 shelter beds, and create 2,700 permanent housing units. These aren't just numbers. They're people gaining stability, accessing services, and moving off the streets. These investments are working, and California can either build on the progress that we're making, or we can lose all those hard-fought gains. In Riverside alone, these proposed cuts would force our city to close over 100 shelter beds, eliminate over 2,000 nights of transitional housing support, and end rental assistance for nearly 100 families. And every mayor standing here today will see similar, if not more, impacts in their cities. So we're calling on the legislature today to restore funding to the $1 billion for HAP Round 7 in this year's budget, because going backwards is not an option. And with that, I want to hand it off to my friend and colleague, Mayor Todd Gloria of the City of San Diego. Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everybody. I'm San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria. As our chair said so well, we are here to underscore how critical it is for the governor and the legislature to continue funding the HAP program. Cities in California are on the front lines of our state's homelessness and housing affordability crisis. And cities are doing the heavy lifting in the streets to get people off the streets for good. We are moving people out of unsafe and unsanitary encampments and putting them on a path to permanent housing and a better future. With a large part of how we're able to do that is through the funds that we receive through HAP. Last year, the city of San Diego achieved a 14% reduction in homelessness, progress that would not have been possible without the investment by the state through HAP. And HAP has allowed us to add 380 new shelter beds to get more people off the streets immediately. And HAP has also been critical to helping us build a comprehensive, multifaceted strategy to reduce homelessness and help us more than double the number of sheltering options to get people into safer environments that are tailored to their needs and address the underlying causes of their homelessness by giving them access to supportive services and care. Without HAP, that progress disappears. It is as simple as that. And that's why we are all here today. At a time when our federal partners are stepping back on housing and homelessness, California must continue to lead by ensuring that we can keep moving people off the streets and into housing. Now, I'll give you a quick story. A young man named Kai in my city, he came to a HAP-funded shelter program after experiencing a family tragedy shortly after he graduated from high school. We got him into shelter, connected to services, and moved into a new apartment where he is now building a new routine and working as a home healthcare aide in San Diego. Kai's story is just one of the many that prove that HAP works and the programs funded by HAP work. And Kai is representative of thousands of people that we are helping to serve right now, but who may not be able to be served if we do not get the full funding that we've enjoyed in previous years. I want Californians to know that mayors know how to make meaningful progress in reducing homelessness. And we need the resources to be able to do it so that impact is lasting and ongoing. Again, that's why we are here today. I want to acknowledge and appreciate the governor's inclusion of $500 million in his proposed budget. That is significantly better than where we were at this time last year. But anything less than $1 billion really does mean that we'll be closing shelters in our respective cities. I don't think any Californian wants that. At a time when cities like mine are seeing progress in reducing the number of encampments on our streets and along our highways, now is the time to double down on these solutions rather than to actually reduce them. So I look forward to joining my colleagues today as we lobby and discuss our appreciation for past support with our governor and the legislature, but ask for their continued partnership in addressing these challenges for the people that we are so privileged to be able to serve as mayors. But my message, our message today, is the continued funding for this program so that we can continue reducing homelessness throughout the great state of California. With that, I'm pleased to give it over to my friend, a very hardworking and busy man, the mayor of San Jose, Matt Mahan. Mr. Mayor.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Chairlock Dawson, Mayor Gloria, all my fellow mayors for all the good work you're doing on the front lines of this crisis. I'm Matt Mahan, mayor of San Jose. And look, I think the bottom line is that while, like all of my fellow mayors, I'm incredibly grateful that the governor and the legislature in past years have made a substantial commitment to building out our homeless response and affordable housing system to address the humanitarian crisis on our streets. A cut of this magnitude now would be not just disappointing, it would be irresponsible. It would mean thousands of people, our most vulnerable neighbors, people like Kai, right back out on the streets. It would mean eroding trust in government in California at all levels. Let me tell you what we've done with HAP in San Jose in recent years. We have used this stream of funding matched by local dollars to build out a robust system of shelter, interim housing, and permanent affordable housing that we have lacked for years in a state with great weather that hasn't had that forcing function of building out a proper response system. Just on the interim housing side of things, we've added 23 sites, over 2,200 beds, immediate, dignified alternatives to the streets, giving people access to a room with a door that locks, their own bathroom, a case manager, on-site security, 3 meals a day. In doing that, we've reduced the number of human beings living outside in tent encampments in our city by nearly 1/3. That's in just the last 4 years. We've saved hundreds of lives. The rate of people dying on our streets has dropped by over 25% in that same time period. In fact, this year, for the first time since we started measuring, a majority of people experiencing homelessness in San Jose will be living indoors, not outdoors, with all of the uncertainty and misery and violence and hardship that comes with being in unsheltered, unmanaged encampments. Here's a really important point, though. In addition to saving lives, we've seen crime go down, we've seen blight go down, and trust in City Hall in San Jose over the last 4 years has gone up 40%. We do an annual poll of our residents. It's up 40% because we're dealing with the most visible and awful humanitarian crisis on our streets that impacts everybody. Whether or not kids can go to their local park, small business owners can keep their shops open. These things are all connected. Safety, blight, the health of small businesses, our public space, and yes, the quality of life of and protection of our most vulnerable neighbors. This has been linchpin funding that's allowed cities like ours to move tens of thousands of people indoors. We cannot go backwards. So I'm proud to stand with my fellow big city mayors to say, we want to be held accountable. We've been using these dollars to move the needle for the entire state, and we would ask that the state continue to show up in a consistent way, in a big way, at that $1 billion a year funding level, so we can keep moving the needle and keep increasing the accountability, have cities, counties, continuums of care compete for those dollars, and prove to the people of California we can turn them into reductions in homelessness, improvements in public safety, lives saved, small business corridors saved. So increase the accountability, but don't cut the funding. Thank you so much, and now it's my pleasure to introduce the mayor of the city of Sacramento, Kevin McCarty, has been doing a great job up here. Mayor, thanks for having us.
Thank you, good morning, and welcome to our capital city. And this is my second year as mayor in about 18 months. And when I ran for mayor and was sworn in, this was the #1 issue in my city. And as I joined the big city mayors, 13 of us across the state of California, this is the big city issue for all of us. And so I'm here to say unequivocally, as Mayor Dawson said, that we need help, ongoing help. It isn't right for this to become a political football every year, because we are balancing our budget, making choices, and the uncertainty is having an impact on how we respond to homelessness. So across California, as was noted, homelessness has gone down by 9% with these HAP investments. In the city of Sacramento, our homeless count, the last pit count, went down by 30%. On top of that, we've increased 500 new beds in the past 18 months here in the city of Sacramento, and we have plans to do another 600 in the next year. And all of this is because of HAP. If we don't have these funds, we will have to make difficult choices. We're already on the chopping block of decreasing funding for public safety, for police and fire. We're going to make strategic cuts in those departments, getting rid of vacancies. But the one that we want to keep funded is our homelessness response program. And we're doing a good job, as are other cities in Sacramento. So I'd like to take it one step further than you, Dawson, and not only restore the $500 million for round 7, but make the pledge for $1 billion for round 8, because we need certainty as we focus on our response. And just lastly, as Mayor Gloria said, these are real people. Last week, I went down here to our Roseville Road site where we have a tiny home village funded by the state of California. I met a guy named Song. He was formerly incarcerated. He was in a tent living on the creek and riverbeds in North Sacramento. He heard about the tiny home villages. He wanted to go there. When he arrived, he was able to get his medication squared away, address his schizophrenia. He told me the day before he got his driver's license paperwork signed up. So he's on his way back because of the programs that we're funding because of HAP. So asking the governor and the legislature to continue supporting our city so we can answer the call. Thank you. With that, I'd like to bring up our mayor of the city of Long Beach, Mayor Richardson.
All right. Well, thank you, mayors, for organizing this press conference. Again, Mayor Dawson, thanks for making this a consistent priority for the mayors. When I became mayor in 2023, right at the beginning of 2023, this was the #1 priority, not only for mayors across the state, big city mayors, but in our region. And we asked our city to step up and declare local emergency on homelessness because we'd seen the problem grow to a scale that was almost unmanageable. But we got to work all across our region, and we delivered for the first time in nearly a decade a reduction overall homelessness in our city. And every year, unsheltered street level homelessness has gone down. But that's not easy to accomplish. It requires building out a larger continuum that thinks through what happens when you're about to have an emergency or a crisis. How do you prevent that crisis from happening? What happens when you do lose that funding or that job or the healthcare benefit and you find yourself on the street? How do we rescue you? What happens when you're living in that tent, in that encampment? We need to help get you off the street into shelter. And then once you're in shelter, how do we connect you to services and casework? And then how do we connect you and put you on a path to permanent housing? There are a number of steps that cities have to do, and they're making meaningful progress on every one of those steps. In the city of Long Beach, we increased our shelter capacity in the last 3 years by 84%, nearly doubling the amount of shelter. And that is one incredible strategy of how we move people out of tents, unmanaged encampments, and into shelter where they have access to services and are on a pathway to make a meaningful difference in their lives. And the result, you see double-digit reductions in chronic crimes and nuisances in our communities. We've restored parks in our downtown and public spaces. We're welcoming conventions again and economic activity that creates a positive loop in our communities to help bring more positive revenue to continue to provide those services that our communities depend on. To be clear, that doesn't happen unless you have partnership and funding from both the state and the federal government. Most cities don't have a public health department. I'll tell you, as one of only 3 cities in the state of California with its own public health department, we are dependent on collaboration with our state, our county, and our federal government. And right now, we're under attack from the federal government. There are programs and grants and dollars we've counted on for generations that we can no longer count on. We need to know who our partners are in this moment. Too many families are counting on us to make sure that we don't give up on them and that we continue to focus on ensuring that individuals in our community have an opportunity to make it. And if they fall in hard times, that we're not going to abandon them. And so in this moment, it's important that our governor and our state legislature remain consistent, fund HAP at $1 billion. These are flexible dollars to focus on outreach and casework and shelter, all of the very basic things that we need to do in order to continue to address this challenge. Now is not the time for us to change our focus or shift our focus. Now is the time for us to work together, collaborate, and double down so that we can continue to see the progress that California and the residents of our cities deserve. So I want to thank the mayors for pulling this together. I want to add Long Beach's voice as the 7th largest city in the state to this call for consistent HAP funding. And now it's my honor to bring up one of our newest mayors in our Big City Mayors Coalition from the city of Oakland, Mayor Barbaloo.
Thank you very much, and let me just say how pleased I am to be here with our big city mayors, and I want to thank our chairwoman for your tremendous steady leadership. And also, yes, I was elected as mayor of Oakland less than a year ago, May 20th, will be my anniversary day. But also, it's good to be back here in Sacramento. I served here for over 7.5 years in the Assembly and in the State Senate, and actually, I chaired it was then the Housing and Land Use Committee of the California State Senate. And so speaking about and working on California's homeless housing assistance and prevention program is really a priority for myself as mayor. It was when I was in the legislature as well as in Congress, because it's a critical role in our homelessness response. Now, every person in our community deserves safety, dignity, and a place to call home. Oakland is preparing to release our new homelessness strategic action plan with a clear goal of reducing our unsheltered homelessness by 50% over 5 years. That's not enough for me personally. So we established the Office of Homelessness Solutions to reorganize our strategy around addressing homelessness. Now, achieving that requires, and in Oakland, this is very important, a racial equity approach at every single level of government through our programs that prevent homelessness and create more housing opportunities. And I want to be clear, I can't accomplish any of this without the HAP funding. In Oakland, and I have to give you the numbers so you can understand, and I'm painting the picture of what we're dealing with in Oakland in terms of people experiencing homelessness. We're 58% of countywide homelessness, but we're 74% of countywide homelessness population who are Black or African American. We help, and this is important because when you look at the disproportionate numbers of people living on the streets, you're looking at people who have been the unfortunate victims of systemic racism, discrimination, gentrification, redlining, you name it. And of course, the affordability crisis and the wage gap. And so we're have to deal with a racial equity lens here in Oakland, in Oakland, as we approach our solutions. We also help approximately 1,500 people exit into permanent housing every year, but roughly 2,500 people become newly housed annually. And again, 59% identify as African American and a disproportionate number compared to 21% of Oakland's African American population. So to turn the tide, we must both reduce the inflow and accelerate exits, and HAP is essential in doing both. It currently serves 802 interim housing beds and program slots. That's 802. out of 5,800 living on the streets, which is a big deal, but we need more. We serve approximately 1,600 people annually. Community cabins, emergency shelters, safe parking lots, transitional housing, and stabilization programs. HAP is one of the very few funding sources that supports operations, not just capital. And it keeps the doors open, the staffing, case management, supportive services, and housing subsidies. Oakland estimates $1.4 billion in additional investment that's needed over the next 5 years. That's $1.4 billion. So our ask, of course, is the $500 million to HAP for round 7, but also we must fund HAP round at $1 billion. And thankfully, again, I'm really thankful, like all of our mayors, for the $500 million that the governor proposed. But all of us, and you're hearing the numbers now, what that will unfortunately force us to do if in fact we don't get the $1 billion, which we desperately need. So I stand proudly with my big city mayors in urging our also gubernatorial candidates to sign the pledge to sustain HAP funding at the $1 billion a year. I believe in accountability. We all do. Adjusted for inflation, this is not a partisan issue, and I want to thank our chair, because this big city mayors organization is not a partisan organization. This is about our unhoused neighbors and, of course, our neighborhoods. So thank you all again. Thank you very much. Now I want to yield to Mayor Aitken from Anaheim, California. And thank you again, Ashley.
Rhymes with bacon. My favorite food. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ashleigh Aitken, and I have the pleasure of being the mayor of my hometown of Anaheim, California. And that perspective is important to me because homelessness is not something that is new to our generation of mayors. Having grown up in Anaheim, I remember seeing homelessness on the streets, driving to school, or working with my parents after church at a soup kitchen, trying to help those in need in the 80s. But I don't think anything prepared me for the growing numbers of homelessness that were on our streets after the housing crash in 2008, a problem that might have not started there, but certainly ballooned to the point where we had growing encampments in our streets. We had families that were not only trying to go to work and send their children to school, but also having to worry about where they were going to live. And we knew, as we were paralyzed as a city, paralyzed as a state, that something had to change. And I felt when I was elected that HAP was the key to starting that journey to change. And to see the progress that cities like Anaheim have made, like cities the mayors behind me have made, it was done with both purpose and intention. And now is not the time to turn around and to slide backwards to where we were 10 years ago. HAP funds have literally moved people off the streets in Anaheim. And they are moving people off the streets that are as diverse as the population of California. In Anaheim alone, we have built housing for transitional age youth that are coming out of the foster care system, that are the most endangered of becoming homeless. We have moved families off the streets so that kids have stable housing as they are trying to learn in those tender years of elementary school and junior high. And we have converted our motels into stable housing for Anaheim residents. I believe that California leadership is right to demand accountability. But I don't think that I am over-speaking for the mayors behind me when I say that we can account for every dollar spent and we can put a face to every dollar spent. We are accountable. We are the incubators for solving problems in real time. And we would like to continue being part of the solution to homelessness. So I am not asking, I am begging Sacramento leadership, our leaders up here, to please continue funding this at least $1 billion in the next cycle. Help us help your families. Because when they go to the grocery store, and when they go to church, and when they are walking their kids to school, we are the ones they are talking to. We are the ones that they are asking for help. And I do not want to tell one resident of Anaheim that I can't, because my hands have been tied by Sacramento. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, I was about to not introduce my amazing sister mayor, Christina Fugazi from the city of Stockton.
Thank you so much. I am proud to stand here with the Big City Mayors Coalition, knowing that we're united in both progress and our purpose. You know, we represent communities, and we're at the ground level, facing California's homelessness crisis. And what we've been able to show is that when the state invests in our cities, we deliver results. Turn the page. HAP funding has been central to our success. It has allowed our cities to expand shelter capacity, move people into housing, and build systems that are more coordinated, responsive, and effective. We've done this with a strong commitment to accountability, because we know that these are taxpayer dollars and the public expects results. At a time when there are real concerns about public spending, it's important to be clear. Cities are stepping up. We are strengthening oversight, we're demanding performance, and we're ensuring that every dollar is tied to outcomes that people can see and feel. Now, that progress is at risk. Proposed reductions to HAP funding would have immediate consequences. Fewer shelter beds, fewer outreach teams, and more people at risk of falling back into homelessness. And that's just a fact. I can tell you that HAP funding has supercharged Stockton and our housing efforts. As Mayor Aitken pointed out, we too have created housing for our foster youth as they exit the system. Without that, they would be on the streets. These funds make an impact on every single level, from prevention to interim housing and rehabilitation services. The proposed reduction would put our community at extreme risk for unsafe and unhealthy living conditions. And what we're seeing in Stockton reinforces a broader truth. When funding is consistent, flexible, and accountable, it works. As cities have a responsibility to not only deliver results, but to help shape solutions that work statewide. That's why we're calling on our state leaders to stay the course, protect HAP funding, make it permanent, and ensure that investments are directed where they have the greatest impact. Because this isn't about one city, it's about a shared commitment to solutions that are proven, responsible, and scalable. And as mayors, we stand ready to lead that effort together. So it's my pleasure now to introduce the mayor of Irvine, Mayor Larry Aitken.
Thank you, and thank you for being here this morning. I have to tell you, I'm actually inspired by what my fellow mayors are doing to deal with this tragic and needless problem of homelessness. When I hear the reports of progress that we have made, that they have made, particularly in the larger cities, San Diego, San Jose, Sacramento, and others, when I hear of that progress, I'm reminded that any responsible legislator and any responsible governor would continue to make the investments that are yielding the benefits, the progress in city after city. And I must say, it's a little dispiriting for me to come up here year after year to have to plead for continuing funding for a positive course that ought to be evident to the governor and every legislator here in Sacramento as well. But here we are. We're going to spend the day talking with legislators, talking with the governor, and seeing to it that this important funding is maintained. So many creative, wonderful things are being done in the cities to meet the crisis with these HAP funds. I just want to tell you a little program we've instituted in Irvine. As mayor, I asked for a list of homeless school kids in Irvine. We're a pretty wealthy community, but we have a lot of poor people as well. Families that are homeless and school children that are homeless. There's a federal requirement that school districts prepare such lists each year. Using HAP funds, we identified that for the 88 homeless school kids in the Irvine Unified School District, we made an arrangement with the Irvine Company, principal developer that owns 40,000 apartment units in the city of Irvine. And there are 500 of them vacant at any one moment in time. We said, look, we want to provide for these families, most of them working families that are nevertheless homeless. We want to provide instant affordability. We want to provide housing grants to be housed on 2-year grants in your apartments, your vacant apartments. We made that deal with the company. We've made the commitment to see to it that every single school child is properly housed in the city of Irvine. And I am pleased to report that that list of 88 has been whittled down by more than half in just the last year, and we expect to whittle it down to zero unhoused kids by this time next year. This is the kind of thing that can be done, must be done. I've lived long enough to see the origins of this housing crisis, and it was in the 1980s with the Reagan cutbacks federally, state cutbacks. Now we're living out that tragedy in city after city. This has to end. The governor and others boast that California is the 4th largest economy in the entire world. Well, we should start behaving like a first world, 4th largest economy and do the right thing. Thank you, mayors. And with that, I want to turn things back to our chair, who's just done an outstanding job of organizing us and helping us to have impact. Thank you.
Wow. Well, you've heard why HAP is so important. These are flexible dollars. Each of these mayors has been creative in how they've used them, and that's what's important, right? We've reached functional zero for youth in my city. We've reached functional zero for veterans. Prevention is important. Rent stabilization, rental assistance. There's so many different programs that our mayors are implementing, and we cannot stop now. So I want to emphasize, we have made real progress. We've made real progress. Why would we go back now? These cuts, if we have them and they move forward, our communities are going to feel these impacts immediately. Fewer shelter beds, fewer services, and more people back on our streets. Year after year, I echo, our cities return here. We've been coming back year after year after year. And yes, we are grateful for the funding we have received. We are grateful to the governor for putting $500,000 back in. But we need $1 billion, and we need it ongoing as we work to solve this crisis, and we're getting there. So the stop and go approach creates uncertainty. You heard some of my mayors say that here. It prevents our long-term planning and limits our ability to deliver the outcomes that Californians expect and deserve. But this year, we have an opportunity. California voters are going to choose our next governor, right? And the candidates' commitment and plan to address homelessness will play a decisive role in how Californians cast their vote. I can guarantee that. So today, the mayors here behind me, we are unified in calling on all of our gubernatorial candidates to sign the HAP pledge, making a clear public commitment to fund proven solutions and partner with our cities to address this crisis. This is not just about the future. Decisions are being made right now, and our mayors are ready. Our cities are delivering, and state leaders must meet the moment with us. Fully fund HAP and stand behind proven success. And that is the end of our formal press conference, and we are happy to take any questions. I think we have a few minutes for that, so we can start, and it can be for any of the mayors here. So we're just going to go down the line here. We'll start with you, sir.
Thank you. Mayor Lee, you probably could start this. Why are these cuts are being made, and have that been shared with you, and what's your thoughts on it?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Why are these cuts are being made? Have that been shared with you, and what are your thoughts on it?
Why they're being made, I'm not certain, other than, of course, budgetary issues. And oftentimes, the budget reflects priorities of the governor and the legislature. And of course, our priorities are making sure that we end homelessness, and HAP funding of $1 billion is key to that. And that's a priority that we're here to talk about, and hopefully the administration and the legislature sees that as their priority also.
And also, the word progress has came up here. It seemed like it's been successful in some of these places, because I know Sacramento has a severe homeless population as well as Stockton, of course, Oakland. Isn't it, your job to make sure that the legislature understand, how important that these progress has been made?
Yes, because first of all, I think most of us have had and anticipated, we already have an experience of severe cuts from the federal government. That's the first gap that we have to address. But secondly, we have to make sure, and in Oakland, we see more people falling into homelessness rather than moving out of homelessness. And we need to make sure that we stop that from happening, and HAP funding will only increase those who are going to have to continue to live on the streets rather than exit homelessness. And that's part of what we have to figure out, and HAP funding is essential in that.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Lee. Yes.
I guess it's fairly obvious that Mayor Mahan is behind this since he's here. What about the rest of the gubernatorial candidates? Have you had conversations on this pledge with them before this? Have you received any feedback from them? And also perhaps legislative leaders like the state budget chairs, the legislative budget chairs, feedback from any of those folks?
Let's take those questions a couple at a time there. So I think that, yes, we have had conversations with several of the gubernatorial candidates. That pledge has just gone out this week, that request. We put that out on the street, so we are waiting to hear from them. And we have ongoing conversations with all of our legislature all the time, and that has been going on for over the past year. So we are hopeful this year we will see the restoration of that another $500 million in there so that we can come to $1 billion. But yes, I don't know if anybody has anything they want to add to that, or you have a gubernatorial pledge.
I'll just say very quickly, as the only current big city mayor in the race, I'll be very proud to be the first to publicly commit to a pledge of $1 billion ongoing, because the state has to show up and help cities and counties deliver on one of Californians' top priorities, which is to end the human suffering on our streets, restore our public spaces, give people dignity and a pathway to permanent housing. So I'm proud to be the first one to sign on publicly and say I'm in for $1 billion every year as your next go.
Very good here. All right, I have a question here.
I know behavioral health and care for are a separate aspect from HAP, but on that front, can you kind of address the increased calls for accountability the governor has put on cities? I mean, earlier this month, he invested nearly $300 million more in behavioral health and homelessness assistance funding, and he expressed frustration that cities, quite frankly, weren't implementing so
It was
much.
counties, not cities.
Excuse me,
And therein lies the issue, actually. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that is the issue in and of itself is, it is the counties get the behavioral health money and they mete it out to the cities through the continuum of care. And one of the frustrations with a lot of the cities here is their interaction with the county and their lack of getting those funds out in a timely fashion and into the right programs. And I don't know if one of the other mayors wants to share their frustration. Would you like to?
So,
I'm looking at Todd.
So Long Beach has its own continuum of care, its own public health department. We're not receiving dedicated funds from the state on behavioral health. And it's a challenge because our constituents, our residents, if someone's having a crisis on the street, they're not calling their county supervisor or their state legislator. They're calling their mayor, and to explain to them that yes, although we're not within the county's health department, we have to go to the county and sort of advocate both to the state and the county in order to get mental health or behavioral health dollars. Now, this coalition has been incredibly helpful and a partner to the state in addressing some of the behavioral health challenges. We stepped up and helped to champion Proposition 1, which created dedicated resources to build the permanent supportive housing, the behavioral health housing that's needed in order to address some of the mental health challenges in our communities. 2 cycles, Long Beach, 7th largest city, has submitted nearly $100 million in applications. We haven't gotten a single dollar from Proposition 1. So we can step up, we can partner, we can point out what needs to happen, but the state has to do their part, and it's a collection. There's HAP, there's the encampment resolution programs, which have been incredibly helpful. There's the accountability on state properties, but there's also the Prop 1 behavioral health dollars, and they need to go to the hands of cities who have the ability to do deal making and actually make projects happen in their communities, and that hasn't happened.
I think Mayor Gloria also wants to add to that. Thank you.
I realize the timing is tight, Madam Chair, but I do want to put an extreme point on. Listen to when the governor speaks on this issue. He'll talk about local governments, which by definition is city and county, but if you drill down, he's talking largely about counties. And you can see that on the dashboards the state puts forward. There's just, I ask you, I implore you to know who's doing the work and who is not, and train the attention accordingly. So I will say, when I was in the legislature, I was here from 2016 to 2020. I did legislation that I recognized and was trying to claw back funds from counties. This was the MHSA millionaires tax in the state of California. Large balances across the state of California in counties' coffers that were not being spent. That was a decade ago, right? So this has been an ongoing challenge. And I do know that some of the counties are making efforts. My own county did support the Care Court Act, but as we see its implementation, we're not seeing large numbers of folks who are dealing with severe mental illness and addiction transitioning off the streets and into care. With Prop 1, yes, these mayors, all of us, myself included, campaigned hard for it. It was a very closely fought election. I would argue that mayors delivered, but cities are not permitted to receive those dollars.
Right.
So my role has been to support my county's application for funding, and they did get some funding the other day. You're exactly right. The project that they got funded will be constructed by the year 2031. What am I supposed to tell the small business owner who has an encampment in front of their business with someone who is in the middle of an addiction or schizophrenic episode? What am I supposed to tell that person? They have to wait till 2031? We have to have action today. There are dollars that are flowing to our local government counterparts at counties, and they have to get in the game. My fear is this. When you leave it to cities to do, I have 2 tools. I have a sanitation department and I have a police department. Neither of those are appropriate tools for responding to somebody that is dealing with addiction and mental illness. If that is what we're left with when there's not accountability and follow through by the folks who have the legal responsibility and the funding to deal with mental health and social services, that is counties. So for the journalists who are here, I thank you so much for being here. You have a tough job right now. Get it straight. It is the counties who are not following through, and we need them to follow through. I will take care of the folks who are displaced temporarily, economically. We'll build the shelters, we'll put them there. But for the people who need long-term assistance, that is our counties. Together, we can solve this problem.
But you do agree that there's enough resources from the state level then?
No.
That
This
needs-
is- No, there can always be more resources. But I would argue if there are unexpended balances in the middle of a crisis, that's a scandal, and that cannot be.
Thank you. Thanks, Todd. All right, I'm looking at, I think we're up against time here. Maybe we have time for one more question. So we've got, somebody in the back here. Yes?
I have a question for Mayor McCarty.
Okay.
So I was just curious, yesterday at Sacramento City Council, you guys approved 35 additional units, tiny home units at the Roseville Road campus that you were discussing. And I was just wondering if you could explain like how shrinking state money affects those efforts and the tiny home initiatives that you put forth.
It will. Those thankfully were funded through HAP and the encampment resolution, but we're expanding other tiny home villages, as you know, with HAP money. And if we don't receive this, we will have to scale back on that. So this kind of goes back to this question. The governor's state address 2 months ago talked about how California's made tremendous progress on reducing homeless versus the rest of the nation. And it's cities who are leading the way with this money, with our encampment resolution money, with the HAP money. And so if we don't get full funding of this, we will absolutely have to scale back, especially when we're looking at making other severe budget cuts as we know here locally.
All right, thank you. I think we have time. I see, I don't want to challenge. So we have one more time. Yeah.
Maybe very quick, can you provide a little bit more specifics of who you're meeting with today, whether it's the Assembly Speaker and the Senate Pro Tem and the Governor, just for specific legislators?
We are meeting with all of the three that you just said and additional legislators as well. I think our last meeting of the day is, I think Assemblymember Wicks, and we're meeting with Brooke Silva, we're meeting with a whole bunch of them. So, yeah. That was a quick one. See, thank you. I knew we'd get to that. I want to thank everybody for being here today and helping us bring light on this crisis ongoing. But we will meet this crisis head on together, unified, and with the right amount of funding. So thank you very much for being here.